Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Kasim Aslam. Hi, Kasim.
Hi, Adi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you for being a guest. We're going to have a great conversation. And Kasim, you are a serial entrepreneur, which is always very exciting and very inspiring. And you build multiple 7- and 8-figure businesses, including 2 successful exits. So that's amazing that you were able to exit successfully, build multiple businesses. That is something that our listeners always like to hear about because it's inspiring and you're always curious, like, how did you do it? What's your secret sauce? What's happening? Okay. You are named one of the top 50 digital marketing thought leaders in the US. You bring deep expertise in scaling businesses, delegation, and hiring world-class talent. So that is incredible. That's all the topics that I love talking about because that's what makes a business able to scale correctly. But let's start with your story. I'm always curious about people's stories. So let's start with yours. How did you get to where you're at today?
I'm a welfare baby. My brother and I were raised by a blind mother who lived on Social Security, and I was I was obsessed with being rich. I thought if I had money, because when you're poor, you think money solves all your problems, and it solves quite a few of those problems. And so I think the entrepreneurial pull just came from, this childhood obsession with equating money to security.
And
And
is it?
very much so. It's so funny because you're tempted to say like, no, money's not everything, and there's so much more. And I know that that's true. And um, it's difficult to perform at your peak when you don't feel safe.
Right.
And I think that safety, there really is something to being settled in that way that I feel really weaponized. I feel like the opportunity to seize things that I never would have had otherwise, and to take risks that I wouldn't have taken, and just to view the world and life in kind of a new way and through a new paradigm. So I'm really grateful for wealth in that way. Um, and it sure didn't solve all my problems. You still wake up and you realize like, oh, okay, I'm still human, and there's only so many Mai Tais by the beach that you can sit before you want something a little bit more meaningful. So that's been a fun second half to the story is uh, I got what I wanted, and I realized that I probably should have asked for more. There's maybe more to life than money. And so I'm on this second half of the pursuit.
That's great. Absolutely. And I had many guests on this podcast when they talk about purpose and really following what you feel is true and all of that. And absolutely there is more, but yes, you do want to have that security as a comparison to what you had before, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it is saying something about you that you actually were able to accomplish. You had that grit, that the decision, the courage, right, to accomplish what you wanted to accomplish, and you went and pursued it, which not a lot of people, people that were in similar circumstances to yours, they didn't necessarily do it. Or some of them wanted money and did it maybe in ways that were not really the most ethical or legal, right? But you had that idea and you decided to do it. What was that? Like you had just the drive, the obsession, like how did you get to actually accomplish that?
I think obsession's the right word. It's funny because, if we taught enough people this, I actually feel like it would really change the success framework. Success is absolutely inevitable. And I really mean that. I think if you live in a developed nation, success becomes inevitable if you're willing to wake up at 4 in the morning and work 80 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more or less the template. People don't like hearing that, but everybody I know that's been self-made and really bootstrapped and 4 a.m. might be a little hyperbolic, but basically all I'm saying is get up before your peers and then work 80 hours a week. And I've heard the counterclaims to like, oh, well, that's not healthy and there's no balance to that. And how would you raise a family and all those things? And fine, those are all really valid points. And it's a balance of risks. It's, well, do you want to be financially successful or not? And if you do, there's an admission to be paid. And the admission is failure. Failure is the tuition that we pay for failing forward and learning. And putting every waking moment into the attempt. And if you can do that, it takes about a decade, has been my experience. If you can do that honestly and earnestly for about a decade, you're more or less guaranteed success. And so now that we know that, what I think a lot of people do is they look at that and say like, okay, cost of admission is too high. Now, can you be successful without waking up at 4 and working 8 hours a week? Sure. I don't know how to do that. The only
I
way, right? The only way I know how to do it is you wake up early and you work your ass off. And then someday you don't have to, which is great. Like today, I don't have to work 8 hours a week if I don't want to. And everybody envies that. They're like, gosh, you're so lucky. In the last 2 months, I've been to Bogota, Costa Rica, Puerto Vallarta, Jackson Hole, Virginia. I think I was in Florida. Like I go wherever I want to go. And my kids go to private school and I eat organic food. And like, am I lucky? Yeah, I'm pretty lucky. And it
Well,
was,
is it luck? I mean, let's talk about it. Are you lucky? Or did you actually create that? Because you could have been, I'm waiting for my lucky moment and still be in the same situation as probably many people that you grew up with.
yeah, well, so this is my favorite conversation. Maybe my friend Artyom Nikolaev, who's one of the best entrepreneurs I know, he said, I'm only rich because I'm lucky. But I stayed out on the field long enough to get lucky. So that's, I think, why I believe success is inevitable is if you really are willing to wake up and put the work in, you're going to, on a long enough timeline, every dog has his day, as they say. Like something is going to happen. You're going to strike gold. It's funny because if I look at, I like to say, oh, I've built 6 multi-million-dollar businesses and I've had 2 exits. Great. I've tried 100, probably over, Adi, if I really think about it. I've had 100 businesses. Truly, not kidding. I've had medical and legal transcription. I owned a moving company for a little bit. I've tried retail. I've tried outsourcing. I've tried, selling purified mercury online, e-commerce, SaaS. I've had 100 attempts and 6 successes. Adjusted for margin of error, I am a complete and total failure. But I just kept at it. And if you can just keep at it, you're going to get quote unquote lucky, right? So it's a little bit of both. I sold a business in an environment where the liquidity for private equity groups was frozen. They always purchased SaaS, but SaaS wasn't for sale because they were trying to wait out the circumstances at the time. They moved down to e-commerce. E-commerce froze up, and so they moved down to agencies. I had 50 to 60 unsolicited offers in a matter of a few months because I was just right place, right time. So, man, was I lucky? Yeah, absolutely, I was lucky. And I've taken 100 swings. I've had 100 at bats. I've had 100 failures. So it's willing to pay the cost of tuition to get lucky. I think it's both.
Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's not only that is, yeah, you start with hard work, but then, we talked a little bit about before the show about systems, but you have to then put systems in place. You have to understand which people to hire. You have to put all the infrastructure there. So, because it is not sustainable to work 80 hours a week or the same business. I mean, I'm not saying you can work 80 hours a week until you are 80 years old, that's fine. But if you work on the same business 80 hours a week without actually doing something different, then it becomes insane because you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, well, now you're an Uber driver.
Right.
Like you can do the same thing over and over and over again and be routine, but you just become an automaton. So I think exactly what you're saying. You make an attempt to do something and you fail at that attempt over and over and over again until you're successful. And once you're successful, and this is the key, this is how you lift yourself out of freelancing or gig economy into true entrepreneurship. Once you've experienced success, you build a system that replicates and repeats that success. And then you move on to the next failure. And then you fail over and over and over again until you achieve success. And then you build a system that replicates that success. And then you move on. And if you can do that, that's how you build a business. And most
That's
people
exactly
don't own a
right.
business, they own a job. So they're just like, oh, I figured out how to do this thing and I'm just going to do this thing over and over and over again. And it's like, well, good for you and God bless. And if that's what you want, great. But if you want a business that makes money without you, sans systems, that doesn't exist. So it's
I-
failure plus systems equals business
that's
is
exactly
the
right.
formula.
That's exactly right. So when you were exiting the business that you exited, did you know that it's going for a successful exit, or things just happen? You decided? I mean, how did that happen?
I wanted to sell. I knew that we were in an environment of potential forced obsolescence. I built the #1 ranked Google Ads agency in the world. At the time of our sell, I think we were the largest dedicated Google Ads agency in existence. We had 200 clients and $100 million in ad spend under management. So, which is a pretty big shot. Most digital agencies don't grow past 20 to 30 clients because it's a hard business to scale. But I had the systems in place that allowed me to scale up to that size. And Google kept rolling out these campaign types. They sunset campaign types that allowed for manual intervention, and they would introduce campaign types that were automated. And the writing was on the wall. I could tell on a long enough timeline, you're just not going to need a Google Ads agency anymore. And so I knew I wanted to sell, but I didn't think we were going to sell as quickly as we did. I thought it was a year or two out. And then all of a sudden, I started getting these inquiries from private equity groups and M&A firms and business brokers and, bird dogs is what they call them. And I had 50 to 60 unsolicited offers. We want to buy your agency. We want to partner with the agency. We're a strategic buyer. And it all happened. The inquiry process happened so fast. And then when I finally found the buyer that I thought was maybe the best choice for us, it was 8 to 9 months of due diligence. It was horrible. I call it was a 9-month proctology exam. It was just very uncomfortable experience. But it taught me so much about.
Well, let's talk about that, because I talk to many M&A investors, advisors, consultants. I want to hear it from you, from the other side of actually going through the due diligence. What lessons did you learn?
Investment bankers are not my favorite people.
Okay.
I call them Ivy League Goldman Sachs douchebags. And the thing that's interesting about them, and what every business owner needs to know, and this is, I think, a ubiquitous truth, they are smarter than you. These are some of the smartest people in the world, some of the best educated people in the world, some of the best trained people in the world go into investment banking. That's where they go, right? They go to like tech, IP, startups, and investment banking. And I don't know if there's a number three. Those are the routes for that type of mind. And if you think you're going to outsmart them, you're wrong. And so a lot of business owners, when they start this process, they try to posture, they try to hide, and that's the wrong approach. Because what ends up happening is the other piece of this is, are they wildly intelligent? Yes, they are. Are they integrous? I guess we'd have to define terms there, but my experience has been uh, they have a flexible grasp of what that word might mean. And so where you end up is in a serpent's den with people that are more capable than you, know words that you don't know, have a whole semantic index that just makes you feel stupid, that get to inspect every element of your business, tell you why all of this is wrong, tell you why you're an idiot, tell you what you could have done better, tell you why your business is worth less than you think it's worth. And a business owner's inclination or instinct is to posture, puff out their chest, and try to play the game on their terms. And the problem with playing the game on their terms is you will lose. It's like, wrestling someone who's bigger than stronger than you. You're just going to lose. The right way to do this, and I only figured this out halfway through, is to humble yourself. And I came into every meeting saying, hey, I'm the dumbest person you're going to talk to all day. I don't know any of your fancy terms. I had to go Google what EBITDA means. You're going to have to explain this clause like I'm 5 years old. You're going to have to explain this process like I'm 5 years old. You're going to have to explain this request like I'm 5 years old, on and on. And what ends up happening is you force them to explain why they're putting you at a disadvantage, or why they're trying to take advantage of you, or like it really, if you put everything into crayon, it evens the playing field. So that's a piece of advice number one. Piece of advice number two is hide nothing. Because I've been privy to this process quite a bit now that I've gone through mine. And here's what they do. This is the playbook. They come to you and say, Adi, I want to buy your business. And then you say, great, I want $50 million for it. And they say, great, $50 million, sounds awesome. We just have to put you through a little due diligence process, no problem. Won't be a big deal. Okay, great. Now, in your mind, you've cashed a $50 million check. You've bought your French chateau. You have your eye on whatever G5 you're going to lease. You've taken the vacation with the kids. You've, second mortgaged your house. And then they put you through due diligence, and it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months. And they come to you at the end, like, oh gosh, you know what? Bad news. You don't have this process in place. You don't have any unique IP. You don't have customers on a contract the way that we thought. You don't have this. You don't have this. You don't have this. You don't have this. We thought we were going to buy you on a 13x valuation. I think I'm going to buy you on a 5 or 6. And if you don't want that, that's okay. But you've already cashed the checks, right? And so you just got down regulated to a degree to where you thought 50 million, and now you're looking at, 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever it is, a fraction at best. And by the way, it's not a cash deal because I actually don't trust that any of this is going to happen. We're going to put you on an earnout. So we'll give you a couple million up front, but everything on the latter half is going to be on an earnout, and you're going to have to stay with the business for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it ends up being. And they get so many people suckered into that so many times. And so the key is don't give them that, oh, bad news moment. At the very front end of the process, say, look, if you want to buy me, let me just put my skunks on the table. I don't have long-term contracts. I don't have any unique IP. I don't have this. I don't have this. I don't have this. I don't have this. And if that doesn't work for you, that's okay. But what you just did is you deflated their ability to bait and switch you. Here's where I am horrible. Here's where my prowess really exists. Tell me what I'm worth now. Because they're smarter than you. And by you, I mean me and all of us, right?
Yeah, but I have a question. How do you know what you are bad? Because I think part of it is, yeah, you do have to be humble, but you also have to have that ability to perceive and know what you're not good at. Because some business owners think, oh yeah, no, I have the contracts, but a lawyer, a very experienced one, can go into and go, you know what, this is not worth anything. They can break it out any minute, right? So they can still break apart what you have, where you are actually convinced with your ego or whatever that you have it. So how do you overcome that?
So a brilliant question. And what occurs to me is you go back to being 5 years old. So they come to you and say, okay, like here, my skunk's on the table. And they're like, all right, given your skunks, I think this is worth $30 million. And then you get to say, well, can you do me a favor? Just out of curiosity, what would downregulate that? Like, these are the things that I think I have, but where in your very wealthy experience have you seen people be wrong, be incorrect, get whatever? You want to burst all the bubbles up front. You want reality. It's so sad because people settle for kind truths when unkind lies would serve them much better. The inconvenient lie that ends up, or forgive me, they settle for kind lies when inconvenient truths are going to serve them. I reversed that. And so what you want is the inconvenient truth. And so I'd say that's number one. Number two is let them know on the outset where they're wasting their time. So if they come to you and say, this is the offer, and you come to me and say, these are my skunks, at a certain point, it's okay to say, look, I'm not settling for less than $10 million cash at close. It's important that we know that. That's in the LOI. You're doing due diligence. I realize you might find things, but unless I'm going to get this, this is a walk. The thing about these people is, and this is where we're in control, they have to deploy. They have to deploy. They've taken other people's money. They're spending other people's money 99 times out of 100, 999 times out of 1,000. And if they don't deploy, they actually don't make money when the business is profitable. They make money when they acquire, when they bundle, when they sell. As a matter of fact, my personal opinion, and I've been yelled at this on stage. This actually happened. I was speaking in an event and somebody shouted out bullshit, and it turned out I was a 20-year private equity person. Private equity groups, and I hope I'm not about to slander your environment, Adi, because I don't know what your relationship is with some of these pegs. They actually don't make businesses more profitable. They don't improve businesses. They don't make them more efficient. They do the opposite. They water down the soup. They focus on short-term KPIs. They try to increase profitability at the expense of longevity, because their metric for success is, oh, if I buy this business, this business, this business, make them look more profitable in the short term, bundle them all together, I can flip them or sell them. It's why private equity, almost as a rule, never holds. Why, Mr. or Mrs. Private Equity person, if you have a magic money-making machine, why are you selling it? Why are you selling it? I, as the business owner, can explain. Oh, I think there's forced obsolescence built into Google, and I think if I attach myself to an AI-driven private equity company, that I actually survive that. You tell me why you're selling your magic money-making machine, Mr. and Mrs. Private Equity person, and it's because they're all playing hot potato. They're like, oh, I'm going to sew these businesses together. I know I've watered down the soup, but it looks like the EBITDA went from X to Y, and it brings the multiple from, A to B, and I can offload this from my balance sheet, and they make money on commissions, the same way used car salesmen make money. They make money when they buy, they make money when they sell. They make money when they bundle. They don't make
But
money.
who buys it then? Another private equity group?
That's the fun part of these, another private equity group. This is why when businesses go public, there's,
It's kind of like the mortgage companies. Like you have the mortgage, then buy another mortgage,
exactly
buys
what
it,
it
another
is.
mortgage buys it.
It's exactly what it is. And then the business, usually when they're taking a business public, it's because it's exhausted its ability to run this trade route. And now they're going to offload the liability on the public. It's why publicly traded companies function the way that they function. They all like, go look, read Jim. Have you ever read Built to Last by Jim Collins?
Mm-hmm.
You know the craziest thing about Built to Last that blows my
But
mind, and I don't know why more people don't talk about it? None of the companies in Built to Last lasted. Isn't that funny? Go read the book and look at the litany of companies he talks about is like, oh, this is, they're built forever. And I'm not bashing Jim Collins. I think he had some really good ideas in the book. It's not his fault. It's the fact that once you take the founder out of the situation and you play this game that private equity companies play, which is make the most expedient choice and decision by committee, look at what happened to Apple after Steve Jobs left. Look at what
so
happened to
what
Google
happened
after
to
Steve
your
Jobs.
companies? Did you sell it to private equity?
I sold it to a private equity backed MarTech company, and there's only so much I'm allowed to say because I don't want to get sued, but I'm very disappointed with the results. Uh, they grew us from 200 clients to 130 clients. They don't have any of my original employees any longer. The decisions they made it was nonstop. Every time I was on the phone with the people that represented the inquiring entity, it was talking about that quarter's profitability. How are we going to achieve more profit this quarter? And I'm like, that cannot be the key performance indicator for this business. It can take 9 to 12 months for the entire sales cycle to take place with the right prospect. You can't talk to me about this quarter. And then they'd say, well, we spent this much advertising dollars in January. How much did we make in January? And I'm like, that's the wrong way to look at it. If you spend money in January, you don't yield that money until September, October, November. So the question is what did we spend, last January if it's September, October, November?
So Aslam, how would you do it now? Like if you had your choice, what would you do differently?
I'd find a strategic. So instead of selling to private equity, because I have a very low opinion of private equity, and by the way, again, smartest people in the world, they make the most money in the world. They create nothing, build nothing, invent nothing, add nothing. They're bankers. They're bean counters. If I could exit again, I would have taken less money to have my company absorbed or partnered with an organization that was still founder led and that somehow was symbiotic with what we were doing. So I was a Google Ads agency. Imagine if I found a really good meta agency that was probably further along than we were in the development of proprietary AI. And they said, hey, we can take what you have and we can protect against the obsolescence that's on the horizon. Now that's 1 + 1 = 3, and I get to save my clients, save my employees, and I don't have to watch the whole thing burn to the ground. Which, I mean, the company still exists. The organization that bought me still exists. And, what happened, happened.
Right. Right. Well, definitely this conversation went in a whole different route that I thought it would, but you're definitely sharing your experience, which is very important. And what happens to systems? Like how important are systems when you're when you're merging with another company as opposed to when you're selling it to the private equity group?
Well, they're important in both instances. The company that bought us wouldn't have bought us if it weren't for our systems. I think I had the most over-engineered marketing agency that's ever existed.
Yeah.
If you're merging with another company, the company with the best systems wins. Meaning, let's say you have a company and I have a company and we both merge. Who has the better lead acquisition system? I do. So it's really, that just became my company, right? We're building
Because
this.
I think the dangerous part, and I just actually wrote an article about it. It got published in CEO World at the beginning of the week, so we can put the link also in the show notes. But it's very important that whatever you do, you actually combine or you causatively figure out how to merge those systems, because otherwise each one of the companies will still operate as a separate company, although they're together, like they merge together, but it can create this internal chaos inside a company if it's not done correctly. Wouldn't you agree?
You're absolutely right. The company that bought us bought 13 to 15 agencies, somewhere in that, and they merged a bunch of them together. And what I experienced happened was, oh, you have a better recruiting system. Your system for recruiting is now everybody's system for recruiting, and everybody else is fired.
Right.
Oh, you have a better customer management system. Your system for customer management is now everybody's system for customer management, and everybody else is fired. So they actually didn't even try to say, like, they didn't parse it apart. They didn't say your system here is better and this system there is better, and let's put those two things together. They looked at systems wholesale as they related to departments, and the prowess of your system dictated whether or not your staff survived the redundancy test. So they weren't even really, this is interesting because I've never thought about this before. They were less concerned with who had the better staff, which I think is a catastrophic error. I think people are the most important. And they were more concerned with who had the more functional, easier to use, easier to visualize system. That's the other thing that was really interesting about private equity is if you can't put it on a spreadsheet, if you can't draw it out in crayon, it doesn't exist. They don't believe in it. It can't, there's no room in their factoring for the ineffable, for the nebulous, for the, if it can't be defined and it can't be visualized and it can't be quantified, it doesn't exist. It's not on my spreadsheet.
Yes, totally. Aslam, it's been amazing to have you on this podcast and have this conversation. If people want to reach out to you to tell you whatever, how can they reach out to you?
They can go to kasim.me, Kasim.me, that has links to all my various businesses, my social links, etc.
Awesome. So definitely we'll include it in the show notes as well. Thank you again for being a guest on this podcast, and thank you for the conversation.
Thanks, Adi. I appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.